Welcome to the Fluent Storybook. This is not just a video about anger management. This is a healing journey for your burning heart. You've been carrying fire inside you for too long. Hot words that escape before you can stop them. Explosive reactions that surprise even you. Rage that builds like pressure in a pot with no release valve. Your anger feels bigger than you, stronger than you, and sometimes it scares you because it doesn't feel like you at all. You wake up promising yourself you'll stay calm today. You tell yourself you won't react, won't explode, won't say things you'll regret later. But then someone cuts you off in traffic, or says something thoughtless, or doesn't understand your point, and suddenly the fire is burning again. Your heart races. Your face gets hot. And words come out of your mouth that you never meant to say. Later, when the anger passes, you feel ashamed. You feel guilty for losing control. You feel confused about where all that heat comes from and why it feels so impossible to stop. You might even feel afraid of your own emotions because they seem so much bigger than your ability to control them. But here's what I want you to understand. Your anger is not your enemy. Your anger is a messenger trying to tell you something important. The problem is not that you feel angry. The problem is that no one ever taught you how to listen to what your anger is really saying, or how to respond to it with wisdom instead of reaction. Today, we're going to change that. Through 10 sacred stories, told in simple, beautiful English so your heart can heal while your language grows stronger, you'll discover that anger is not a wild beast that controls you. It's a powerful energy that, when understood properly, can become your teacher and your protector instead of your destroyer. If you're tired of feeling like anger controls your life, if you're ready to transform your relationship with this burning emotion, if you want to learn how to feel angry without acting angry, then this journey is for you. Let's begin to cool the fire and find the wisdom hidden in your heat. Story 1. The Blacksmith Who Learned to Shape Fire In. A small mountain village lived a blacksmith named Marcus who was famous for two things: creating the most beautiful metalwork anyone had ever seen, and having the most terrible temper anyone had ever witnessed. Marcus's anger was legendary. When something went wrong in his forge, he would throw tools, shout at his apprentices, and sometimes destroy hours of work in a moment of rage. "Your anger is ruining everything beautiful you create," his wife would tell him gently after each explosive episode. "I can't help it," Marcus would reply, looking ashamed. "The anger just takes over. It's stronger than I am." One day, a master blacksmith from the capital city came to visit Marcus's forge. The old master watched quietly as Marcus worked on a delicate iron rose. Everything was going perfectly until Marcus made a small mistake with one petal. Instantly, his face turned red. His hands began shaking with fury, and he raised his hammer to smash the entire piece. "Stop," said the master calmly. Something in the old man's voice made Marcus freeze with his hammer in the air. "Come here, young man. Let me show you something about fire." The master led Marcus to the forge where the coals glowed red hot. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at this fire?" "I see fire," Marcus said, confused. "Hot coals. Dangerous flames. Look closer," said the master. "Do you see chaos or do you see power under control?" Marcus studied the forge more carefully. The fire was intense, but it stayed exactly where it was supposed to stay. It was hot enough to melt metal, but contained within its proper space. It was powerful, but purposeful, I see. "Controlled power," Marcus said slowly. "Exactly. Fire is not dangerous because it burns hot. Fire is only dangerous when it burns in the wrong place. In this forge, fire serves us. It heats the metal so we can shape it into beauty. But if this same fire escaped and burned in my workshop, it would destroy everything I've built. Marcus began to understand. Your anger, continued the master, is like this fire. It's not evil. It's not something to be ashamed of. Anger is powerful energy that can help you create or help you destroy, depending on where you let it burn. But how do I control it? When I get angry, it feels like the fire is everywhere at once, the master smiled. Watch me work. For the next hour, the master demonstrated his craft. When he made a mistake, Marcus could see frustration flash across the old man's face. But instead of exploding, the master would pause, take a slow breath, and say quietly, "The metal is teaching me something. Let me listen." "You felt angry when you made that mistake," Marcus observed. "I saw it in your eyes." "Of course I felt angry," said the master. "Anger tells me that something matters to me, that I care about doing good work. But feeling angry and acting angry are two completely different things. I feel the heat, then I decide what to do with it. How? I built a forge inside my mind, just like this one in my workshop. When anger starts to burn, I don't try to put out the fire completely. That would waste its power. Instead, I contain it in the proper place and ask, what is this anger trying to teach me? What does it want me to create or protect? How can I use this energy for building instead of destroying?" The master picked up the iron rose that Marcus had almost destroyed. "This anger you felt, what was it really about? Was it about making a mistake, or was it about caring so much that you want every piece to be perfect?" Marcus looked at his work with new eyes. I think it was about caring. About wanting to create something beautiful and feeling frustrated when I fell short. Then use that caring energy to try again, not to destroy what you've already built. Your anger is trying to help you create beauty, but you've been letting it burn in the wrong place. From that day forward, Marcus practiced building a forge in his mind. When he felt anger rising, instead of letting it explode everywhere, he would pause and ask, "What is this fire trying to help me create or protect?" Sometimes his anger was telling him to stand up for himself. Sometimes it was pushing him to work harder on his craft. Sometimes it was protecting something he loved. Marcus's temper didn't disappear overnight, but his relationship with it completely transformed. His anger became his teacher instead of his destroyer, his fuel instead of his weapon, and his metalwork became even more beautiful because it was shaped by controlled fire instead of chaotic explosion. The sacred truth. Anger is not your enemy. It's powerful energy that has been burning in the wrong place. When you learn to contain it properly and listen to its message, anger can become the fire that shapes your life into something beautiful instead of the explosion that destroys everything you've built. Story 2. The Ocean and the Hurricane. There once was an ocean that had lived peacefully for thousands of years. Its waters were deep, calm, and wise. Fish swam safely in its depths, boats traveled smoothly across its surface, and people found peace walking along its shores. But sometimes hurricanes would come. These storms were wild, violent, and destructive. They would churn the ocean's surface into massive waves, turn the peaceful water into chaos, and make the ocean feel like it was no longer itself. For years, the ocean believed that when hurricanes came, it had to become a hurricane too. When the storm brought wind and chaos to its surface, the ocean would respond by becoming violent all the way down to its deepest places. Every fish, every plant, every grain of sand would be disturbed by the ocean's decision to match the hurricane's energy. After each storm, the ocean would feel ashamed. Why do I let these hurricanes change who I am? It would wonder. I am deep and wise and peaceful, But every time a storm comes, I become just as destructive as the chaos above me. One day, an ancient whale who had lived in the ocean's depths for over a century spoke to the troubled waters. "Great ocean," said the whale, "I have lived in your depths through 1,000 hurricanes. Can I share something I have observed?" "Please," said the ocean. "I need wisdom. I'm tired of becoming a monster every time a storm visits." "You have never become a hurricane," said the whale gently. "Not once in all the storms I have witnessed." "What do you mean?" "I feel the chaos everywhere. I feel violent and destructive and out of control." "Look deeper," said the whale. "During the worst hurricane you can remember, was your deepest water calm or chaotic?" The ocean thought carefully. Even during the most violent storms, its deepest places had remained still and peaceful. The bottom was always calm, the ocean realized. But the surface felt so chaotic that I thought all of me was disturbed. "Exactly," said the whale. "The hurricane affects your surface, but it never touches who you really are. Your deepest self remains peaceful, wise, and strong. The problem is that you've been paying attention only to your surface and forgetting about your depth. But the surface chaos feels so real, so overwhelming. How can I remember my depth when the storms are so loud?" The whale smiled with ancient wisdom. "When a hurricane comes, instead of trying to fight it or join it, simply remember, I am not my surface. The storm is temporary and shallow. I am deep and eternal. The hurricane cannot change my true nature. It can only disturb the top layer of who I am." "But what about all the damage the storms cause? The boats that get tossed around, the beaches that get eroded?" "That's exactly why you must remember your depth," said the whale. "When you stay centered in your deep, calm nature, you can let the surface storm pass without adding your own chaos to it. The hurricane is already destructive enough. It doesn't need your help. But if you remain deep and wise, you can actually minimize the damage by not making the storm worse with your own reaction." From that day forward, when hurricanes came, the ocean practiced remembering its depth. Instead of letting the surface chaos convince it that all of itself was disturbed, the ocean would focus on its deep, peaceful places and think, "This storm is loud but temporary. It affects my surface, but it cannot touch who I really am." The hurricanes still came, but they no longer transformed the ocean into something it wasn't. The surface would still be choppy during storms, but the ocean's response was no longer destructive. Ships still had to be careful during hurricanes, but they weren't dealing with double chaos. They were dealing with a natural storm passing over deep, wise waters that refused to lose themselves in temporary surface drama. Most importantly, the ocean learned that its power came not from matching the hurricane's violence, but from remaining rooted in its own deep, calm nature. The deeper it stayed, the more stable it became, and the faster the surface storms would pass. The sacred truth. You are not your angry thoughts. You are the deep, wise consciousness that observes them. When anger storms across the surface of your mind, remember your depth. The emotion is temporary and shallow. Your true self is deep and eternal. You don't have to become the storm just because it's passing through your awareness. Story 3. The gardener and the poison ivy Maria had the most beautiful garden in her neighborhood. But it had one persistent problem: poison ivy that kept growing along her back fence. Every few months Maria would notice the poison ivy spreading, and every time she saw it, she would become furious. "Not again!" she would shout, marching over to rip the poison ivy out with her bare hands. She would yank and pull and tear at the vines, getting more and more angry as she worked. Why does this keep coming back? Why can't I get rid of it once and for all? But every time Maria attacked the poison ivy in anger, two things happened. The poison ivy would grow back stronger than before, and Maria would end up with painful rashes all over her arms and hands from touching the plant while she was upset and not being careful. After months of this pattern, Maria's neighbor, an experienced gardener named Mrs. Chen, came over during one of Maria's poison ivy battles. "My dear," Mrs. Chen said gently, watching Maria furiously yanking at the vines, "you're making this much harder than it needs to be. This stupid poison ivy makes me so angry," Maria said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I hate it. I just want it gone." "I can see that you're angry," said Mrs. Chen calmly. "But can I ask you something? Has getting angry at the poison ivy ever made it disappear permanently?" Maria stopped pulling and thought about it. "Well, no, it always comes back, and I always end up with these terrible rashes. Would you like to learn a different way?" The next day, Mrs. Chen returned with proper gardening gloves, long-sleeved clothes, special tools, and a gentle smile. "The first thing to understand," Mrs. Chen explained, "is that poison ivy is not evil. It's not growing here to make you angry. It's just a plant doing what plants do, trying to survive and grow. Getting angry at it is like getting angry at rain for being wet. But I don't want it in my garden." "Of course you don't, and you can absolutely remove it. But watch what happens when you approach it with wisdom instead of anger." Mrs. Chen put on her protective gear slowly and thoughtfully. She studied the poison ivy carefully, identifying where the roots were strongest and where the plant was most vulnerable. She worked methodically, cutting the vines in the right places and digging up the roots completely instead of just ripping at the surface. "When you attack the poison ivy in anger," Mrs. Chen explained as she worked, "you're in a hurry to make it disappear, so you only remove what you can see. But the roots stay strong underground. Also, when you're angry, you're not thinking clearly, so you touch the plant carelessly and hurt yourself." Maria watched in amazement as Mrs. Chen removed twice as much poison ivy in half the time, without getting a single rash. "But how do you stay so calm when dealing with something annoying?" Maria asked. "I don't try to feel differently about the poison ivy," Mrs. Chen replied. "I acknowledge that it's frustrating to deal with unwanted plants. But I separate my feelings from my actions. I can feel annoyed and still choose to respond wisely." Mrs. Chen taught Maria the important difference between reacting and responding. "Reacting is when your emotions control your actions," she explained. "You see the poison ivy, you feel angry, and immediately you start ripping and pulling without thinking. But responding is when you feel the emotion, then choose your actions based on wisdom instead of heat. So I can feel angry about the poison ivy, but still handle it calmly?" "Exactly. Your anger is giving you important information. It's telling you that something in your garden needs attention. But once you have that information, you can choose how to act on it." Maria practiced this new approach. When she saw poison ivy growing, she would first acknowledge her frustration. "I see you, anger. You're telling me there's a problem that needs my attention." Then she would get her proper tools, put on protective clothing, and remove the plant methodically and safely. The results were amazing. Not only did Maria stop getting rashes, but the poison ivy stopped coming back as quickly because she was removing it completely instead of just breaking it off at the surface. Most importantly, Maria discovered that she could apply this wisdom to other frustrations in her life. When her computer crashed, instead of shouting at it, she would acknowledge her frustration and then choose a wise response. When her neighbor's dog barked loudly, instead of getting into an angry confrontation, she would recognize her annoyance and then decide how to address the situation constructively. The sacred truth. The problem is not that you feel angry. The problem is when you let anger choose your actions. You can acknowledge your anger as important information while still responding to situations with wisdom, protection, and strategy. Your emotions are messengers, not masters. Story 4. The Volcano and the Mountain Deep. Beneath a peaceful mountain lived a volcano that had been dormant for many years. The mountain was covered with beautiful forests, clear streams, and villages where people lived happily, never thinking about the fire that slept below. But the volcano was not truly at peace. Deep in its core, pressure had been building for decades. Small irritations would trigger intense heat. A minor earthquake, a change in the underground water flow, or even the weight of too much snow on the surface. Each time the volcano felt pressure, it would think, "I need to explode. I need to release this heat immediately or I'll burst apart." For years, the volcano believed that explosion was its only option. When the pressure built up, it would erupt violently, destroying trees, frightening people, and covering everything with ash and lava. After each eruption, the volcano would feel temporarily relief, but also terrible guilt. "Why am I so destructive?" the volcano would wonder. "I don't want to hurt the forest or scare the people, but when the pressure builds up, I can't seem to help myself." One day, the volcano met an ancient geyser that lived nearby. The geyser had been releasing pressure from underground for thousands of years, but it had never destroyed anything. Instead, people came from far away to watch its beautiful, powerful displays of steam and hot water. "How do you handle the underground pressure?" the volcano asked the geyser. "Don't you ever feel like you need to explode?" "Oh, I feel pressure all the time," said the geyser calmly. "The same forces that affect you affect me, too. But I learned long ago that explosion is not the only way to release pressure." "What do you mean?" "Watch me," said the geyser. The volcano observed as pressure built up in the geyser's underground chambers. But instead of exploding chaotically in all directions, the geyser released the pressure in a controlled, channeled way. Steam and hot water shot up in a powerful but contained column, releasing all the built-up energy without destroying anything around it. You chose where the pressure went," the volcano realized. "Exactly. I feel the same intense force you feel, but I direct it upward in a focused stream instead of letting it explode randomly. The pressure still gets released, completely and satisfyingly, but in a way that creates beauty instead of destruction." "But how do you control such powerful force?" "I don't control the pressure itself," explained the geyser. "That would be impossible. Instead, I created a clear channel for it to travel through. When I feel the pressure building, instead of panicking and trying to hold it in until I explode, I direct it toward my prepared release point." The geyser taught the volcano about the difference between suppression and direction. Suppression is when you try to hold the pressure in completely, which always leads to explosion. But direction is when you acknowledge the pressure and give it a constructive path to follow. How do I create this kind of channel? First, you have to prepare before the pressure builds. You can't wait until you're ready to explode to figure out where the energy should go. During your calm times, you develop healthy ways to release intensity. The geyser helped the volcano create several pressure release systems. Small steam vents that could release heat gradually, underground channels that could redirect energy away from populated areas, and even creative outlets like heating natural hot springs that people could enjoy. Most importantly, the geyser taught the volcano to recognize the early signs of pressure building, so it could begin releasing energy gradually instead of waiting until explosion felt inevitable. The pressure you feel is not bad, the geyser reminded the volcano. It's powerful energy that can be destructive or creative, depending on how you channel it. Your job is not to eliminate the pressure, that's impossible. Your job is to become skilled at directing it constructively. The volcano began practicing these new techniques. When it felt pressure building, instead of panicking or trying to hold it in, it would direct the energy through its prepared channels. Sometimes this meant releasing steam gradually through small vents. Sometimes it meant heating underground springs. Sometimes it meant channeling the energy into creating new, fertile soil. The mountain remained a volcano. It still felt intense pressure and still needed to release powerful energy. But it was no longer a destructive volcano. It became a creative force that used its inner fire to nurture life instead of destroying it. The sacred truth. Your intense emotions are not something to eliminate or suppress. They're powerful energy that needs proper channels for expression. Instead of waiting until you explode, create healthy outlets during calm moments. Your anger can fuel creativity, justice, and positive change when you direct it wisely instead of letting it explode randomly. Story 5. The musician and the broken string Elena was a violinist who had been playing professionally for 15 years. She was known for her passionate performances and emotional depth. But she had one problem that was affecting her career. When something went wrong during a performance, she would become so angry that she couldn't continue playing. If a string broke in the middle of a solo, Elena would stop the entire performance, throw down her violin, and storm off stage. If she made a mistake during a difficult passage, her face would turn red with rage, and her playing would become harsh and discordant. If the orchestra was out of tune or the conductor made an error, Elena would glare and play aggressively, ruining the harmony of the entire ensemble. "Your talent is extraordinary," her mentor told her after yet another performance ruined by Elena's angry reaction to a minor mistake. "But your anger is destroying your music. You can't create beauty while you're burning with rage, but it makes me so furious when things go wrong," Elena protested. "I practice for hours to make everything perfect, and then some little thing ruins it all. How can I not be angry?" Her mentor, an elderly man who had been playing violin for 60 years, smiled knowingly. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led Elena to a small practice room where a young student was taking a lesson. As they watched through the window, the student's A string snapped right in the middle of a beautiful piece. Elena expected the student to stop, to get frustrated, to lose the musical moment entirely. But instead something magical happened. The student paused for just a breath, smiled slightly, and then continued playing the piece, rearranging it on the spot to work with only 3 strings. The music was different than planned, but it was still beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful because of its unexpected adaptation. "How did she do that?" Elena whispered. "She understands something you haven't learned yet," her mentor replied. "She knows that music is bigger than perfect execution. Music is about flowing with what is, not forcing what should be." After the lesson, Elena's mentor introduced her to the young student, whose name was Sarah. "I saw what you did when your string broke," Elena said. "Weren't you angry? Didn't you want to stop and fix it?" Sarah laughed. Oh, I felt frustrated for about half a second. But then I remembered what my teacher always says. The music wants to be born, and it will find a way, even through imperfection. But how do you not get angry when something goes wrong? I do get angry sometimes, Sarah admitted. But I've learned that anger and music can't exist in the same space. When I'm angry, I'm focused on what's wrong. When I'm making music, I'm focused on what's possible. I can't do both at the same time. Elena's mentor nodded. This is the choice every musician faces in the moment something goes wrong. You can choose anger and lose the music, or you can choose music and transform the mistake into something new. But what about all the hours of practice? What about wanting everything to be perfect? Practice is important, said Sarah, but practice is preparation for improvisation, not prevention of mistakes. The most beautiful music I've ever heard has come from musicians who could dance with their mistakes instead of fighting them. Elena began to understand that her anger was coming from a false belief, that perfection was the goal of music. But music was actually about communication, expression, and connection. Things that could happen even in the presence of mistakes. Sometimes, especially because of them, Elena started practicing not just her music but her response to mistakes. She would deliberately create challenging situations, playing with old strings that might break, performing in uncomfortable positions, even having friends create unexpected disruptions, so she could learn to stay musical even when things went wrong. The breakthrough came during a performance 6 months later. Elena was playing a solo when her E string snapped loudly right during the climax of the piece. For a split second, she felt the familiar surge of anger. But then, instead of stopping, she smiled and continued the piece, reimagining it for 3 strings. The audience held their breath as Elena wove the melody through the remaining strings, creating something they had never heard before. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People were crying. Several musicians in the audience said it was the most moving performance they had ever witnessed. After the show, a young violinist approached Elena. "That was incredible. How did you stay so calm when your string broke?" Elena thought for a moment. I realized that my choice in that moment wasn't between perfect and imperfect music. My choice was between music and no music at all. And music, even imperfect music, is always better than silence born from anger. The sacred truth. Perfectionism and anger often work together to rob you of joy and effectiveness. When you're more committed to the beauty of what you're creating than to the perfection of how you're creating it, mistakes become opportunities for innovation instead of triggers for rage. Flow with what is, and transform obstacles into art. Story 6. The farmer and the storm Jacob had been farming the same land for 20 years. He knew every season, every pattern of rain and sun, and every trick for growing the healthiest crops. But Jacob had developed a bitter relationship with weather that didn't match his plans. When unexpected storms came and damaged his crops, Jacob would shake his fist at the sky and curse the weather. When droughts lasted too long, he would spend hours complaining to anyone who would listen about how unfair nature was. When hail destroyed his tomatoes or wind knocked down his corn, Jacob would storm around his property in a rage, sometimes taking his anger out on his equipment or his family. "Why does this always happen to me?" Jacob would demand after each weather disappointment. "I work harder than anyone, I plan better than anyone, but the weather keeps ruining everything I build." Jacob's anger about uncontrollable weather was affecting every aspect of his life. He couldn't enjoy the beautiful days because he was always worried about bad weather coming. He couldn't appreciate good harvests because he was always bitter about the crops he'd lost to storms. His family started avoiding him during difficult seasons because his rage made the whole farm feel tense and unhappy. One year, a severe drought followed by destructive hailstorms hit Jacob's region particularly hard. Many farmers lost entire crops. Jacob was so angry that he decided to visit his neighbor, an elderly farmer named William, to commiserate about how unfair and terrible the weather had been. But when Jacob arrived at William's farm, he was surprised by what he found. Despite having experienced the same drought and hailstorms, William was calmly replanting his damaged fields and humming softly to himself. "William," Jacob called out, "can you believe how terrible this weather has been? Aren't you furious about losing your crop?" William looked up from his planting and smiled peacefully. "The weather has certainly been challenging this year," he said mildly. "But I'm not furious about it. Weather is weather. Weather is weather," Jacob exploded. "This drought and these hailstorms have destroyed months of work. How can you be so calm about it?" William wiped his hands on his pants and walked over to Jacob. "Can I ask you something? In all your years of farming, how many times has getting angry at the weather changed the weather?" Jacob thought about it. "Well, never. But that doesn't mean I should just accept it." "I'm not asking you to just accept it," William said gently. "I'm asking you to understand the difference between things you can control and things you can't, and then to put your energy where it can actually make a difference." William showed Jacob around his farm. "When I saw the drought coming, instead of getting angry about it, I focused on things I could control. I installed better irrigation. I chose drought-resistant crops. I mulched heavily to retain soil moisture. When the hailstorm hit, instead of raging about the damage, I immediately started planning how to replant and what I could still salvage." "But don't you feel frustrated when your hard work gets destroyed?" "Of course I feel disappointed," William admitted. "I'm human. When I see damaged crops, there's a moment of sadness and frustration, but I don't let those feelings control my actions. I feel the disappointment, then I ask, what can I do now with the situation as it actually is?" William explained his philosophy. "I used to be like you, Jacob. I would rage at every storm, curse every drought, and let weather ruin not just my crops but my peace of mind. But one day I realized something important. The weather doesn't know I'm angry at it. My anger doesn't hurt the storm, it only hurts me and my family. So what changed? I learned to separate the weather from my response to the weather. Bad weather is going to come. That's not personal, it's just nature. But how I respond to bad weather is completely up to me. I can spend my energy being angry about what I can't control, or I can spend it taking action about what I can control." William taught Jacob about the difference between acceptance and resignation. Resignation is giving up and doing nothing, but acceptance is acknowledging reality clearly so you can respond to it effectively. When I accept that storms are part of farming, I don't become passive. I become strategic. I prepare for storms. I adapt to them, and I recover from them without wasting energy on rage. Jacob began to see that his anger at uncontrollable weather had been preventing him from dealing with it wisely. Instead of using his energy to adapt and prepare, he had been using it to fight reality itself. That season, Jacob practiced William's approach. When a late frost threatened his seedlings, instead of cursing the weather, he focused on covering his plants and moving vulnerable crops to safety. When summer brought unexpected heat waves, instead of raging at the sun, He adjusted his watering schedule and provided shade for his crops. The amazing thing was that Jacob's farm became more productive, not because the weather got better, but because he was putting all his energy into smart responses instead of wasting it on useless anger. The sacred truth. You cannot control what life sends your way, but you have complete control over how you respond to it. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it strategically, you discover that your energy is far more powerful when directed toward solutions instead of protests. And so we reach the end of these 6 sacred stories about anger. But this is not really an ending. It is a transformation. A transformation of your relationship with the fire that lives inside you, the heat that has caused you so much pain and regret. If you have listened to these stories with your whole heart, something profound has shifted inside you. You now understand that anger is not your enemy, not a character flaw, not evidence that you are broken or bad. Anger is powerful energy that has been burning in the wrong places, exploding at the wrong times, and destroying the very things you most want to protect. You came to this video believing that anger was something you had to eliminate, suppress, or feel ashamed of. But now you know the deeper truth. Anger is a messenger, a teacher, and a guardian that has been trying to serve you but didn't know how. When Marcus the blacksmith learned to build a forge in his mind, he discovered that the same fire that had destroyed his work could be channeled to create beauty. When the ocean remembered its depth, it learned that surface storms don't have to disturb its essential peace. When Maria the gardener separated her feelings from her actions, she found she could acknowledge frustration while still responding wisely. When the volcano learned to direct its pressure, it became a creative force instead of a destructive one. And when Jacob the farmer stopped fighting uncontrollable weather, he discovered that his energy was far more powerful when focused on smart responses instead of useless protests. These are not just stories. They are mirrors reflecting the transformation that is possible for you. Your anger, like theirs, can become your teacher instead of your destroyer, your fuel instead of your weapon, your protector instead of your prison. But transformation takes practice. You will not master your anger after watching one video, just as you did not develop your angry patterns after one bad day. Be patient with yourself as you learn to build forges in your mind, to remember your depth when surface storms come, to separate feeling from acting, to channel pressure into creativity, and to focus your energy on what you can actually control. Here's what you must remember in the moments when anger comes knocking at the door of your heart. You are not your anger. You are the deep, wise consciousness that can observe anger, listen to its message, and choose how to respond. The heat you feel is temporary. Your ability to choose your response is eternal. Your anger has important information for you. It's telling you that something matters to you, that a boundary has been crossed, that something needs your attention or protection. Listen to the message, but don't let the messenger control your actions. You have more power than you know. In the space between feeling angry and acting angry lies your greatest strength, the power to choose. This space might be only a breath long at first, but with practice, you can learn to live in that space of choice. Your relationships will heal. When you stop exploding and start responding, when you stop destroying and start creating, the people in your life will begin to trust you again. More importantly, you will begin to trust yourself. Your energy will multiply. Right now, most of your emotional energy is being wasted on explosions that solve nothing and hurt everyone, including you. When you learn to channel that same energy into wisdom, creativity, and constructive action, You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish. The world needs your controlled fire. It needs your passion channeled into justice, your intensity focused on creation, your protective instincts directed toward love instead of destruction. You have the power to be a blacksmith of beautiful solutions, an ocean that stays deep during surface storms, a gardener who tends problems with wisdom, a volcano that creates fertile ground for new growth, and a farmer who builds resilience instead of fighting reality. Your anger is not your shame. It's your strength, waiting to be properly directed. If these stories have touched your burning heart, if you feel ready to transform your relationship with anger from destruction to creation, then please subscribe to the Fluent Storybook. This channel is your sanctuary, a place where you can return whenever you need to remember that your intensity is a gift, not a curse, and that your fire can warm hearts instead of burning bridges. Share these stories with someone whose heart is also burning. The world is full of people who think their anger makes them bad people, who are ashamed of their intensity, who have been told to just calm down without being taught how. Your sharing might be the key that unlocks their understanding that anger can be transformed from enemy to ally. Until we meet again in the next collection of sacred stories, carry this truth with you. You are not a broken person who gets too angry. You are a powerful person learning to use your power wisely. Your fire is meant to create, to protect, to fuel positive change in the world. The journey from destructive anger to creative power is not easy, but it is the most important journey you will ever take. Because on the other side of this transformation lies not just peace for your own heart, but the ability to be a force for healing in a world that desperately needs people who know how to channel intensity into love. Your anger has been waiting your whole life for you to understand its true purpose. Today is the day you stop fighting your fire and start building with it. Welcome home to your power. Welcome home to your wisdom. Welcome home to the Fluent Storybook.